Hello and welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I am elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. Thank you everybody for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. So I'm going to kick off today's conversation with an exciting Mars Society update. The 2025 International Mars Society Convention is officially scheduled for October 9th through 11th, that is a Thursday to Saturday, at the University of Southern California, USC, in Los Angeles. This year it's celebrating its 28th year, and this global conference will focus on Mars exploration, human settlement planning, and cutting-edge space technologies. This year's theme is Mars, the time has come. Love it, perfect timing, which aligns with the U.S. government's recent announcement to prioritize a human mission to Mars. Now, if you have groundbreaking research or innovative ideas to share, now is your chance. The Mars Society is officially calling for abstracts, so please submit your proposals by June 30th to be considered as a speaker at the convention. Don't miss out on this opportunity to help shape the future of Mars exploration. Visit www.marssociety.org for more details. All right. Well, it is always a special occasion when we have our founder, Dr. Robert Zubrin, on the podcast, and today is no exception. So you already are probably familiar, but in addition to being the Mars Society's fearless leader, Dr. Zubrin is the former president of Pioneer Astronautics. He was previously a staff engineer at Lockheed Martin in Denver. He holds a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics and a PhD in nuclear engineering from the University of Washington. Zubrin has authored many books, including A Case for Mars, and is best known for his advocacy of the manned exploration of Mars. Dr. Zubrin was the driving force behind Mars, a proposal intended to produce significant reductions in the cost and complexity of such a mission. And disappointed with the lack of interest from the government in Mars exploration, Dr. Zubrin established the Mars Society in 1998, which works to educate the public, the media, and the government about creating a permanent human presence on the red planet. Dr. Zubrin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'm excited to speak with you. Again, I think this is our third time now.
I think so too. Yes.
Here. Well, as you know, on Red Planet Live, we have a segment called Question of the Day, just meant to be an icebreaker. I promise no right or wrong answer. So today's question is, if you could be on any TV show, what would it be and why?
I could be on any TV show.
Any TV, current, past. You could be on, original Star Trek. You could be on.
Well, yeah, sure, the original Star Trek. And I'd like to be on the Enterprise.
Okay.
But if I couldn't be on the original Star Trek, then the Expanse. Yeah.
Okay, the Expanse. We just talked about this the other day. So if you were on the Enterprise, the original, what would your role be?
What my role be? I was actually a Kirk fan. Okay. Because you see, Spock was logical. And McCoy was emotional, but Kirk was creative. And, unlike what's his name, the one that followed him, Picard, I had a friend who was an Air Force officer, and they were using Picard and Kirk as two models of military leadership. And the general was saying to a group of mid-level officers that he was trying to teach about the command style, that Picard was much better because he followed the rules, he operated in an orderly fashion, he had a consultative command style, etc., whereas Kirk would just wing it. And my friend raised his hand and said, but sir, who would you rather have on the bridge if he had to take on the Romulans? Okay. And, so sure. But I also liked the original Star Trek because they had a positive sense of what humanity or the Federation represented. They, Kirk would have no restraint if he ran into a planet controlled by Nazis to overthrow the Nazis. It'd be none of this prime directive stuff about, their culture is Nazism, and so we should just leave it alone. No. In other words, they knew what they stood for.
That's a great answer. Okay. So you're going to be on the original Star Trek, okay? With James D. Kirk. I like it. Since Star Trek was your answer, I will not say Star Trek. I will say Survivor. I watched the show Survivor a lot. It's funny to see the social game that people play and the dynamic and how they have to work together as a team. And then as soon as an opportunity comes up, they're gonna vote out that person and backstab them so that they can win. And so it's an interesting dynamic. So I think that I could probably find a spot on Survivor, but it's just what I'm watching right now, so that's why it's top of mind. But as we jump into the conversation, want to remind everybody that's listening today, if you have any questions for Dr. Zubrin, please put those into the chat so we can get those sprinkled in. I'll make sure to incorporate those throughout the conversation. But Dr. Zubrin, want to start off the conversation and focus on your recent article that was in the New Atlantis. It's called "The Mars Dream is Back. Here's How to Actually Make It Happen." I had an opportunity to read that, and of course, as soon as I finished it, I was like, I've got some questions I need to ask on the next episode of RPL. So I wanted to dive into that and focus on that specific article to start. But one of the things specifically that I read, as you were mentioning, that NASA today is not competent in leading the space exploration as much as it was in the Apollo era. So now that we're looking for humans to Mars mission, what potential changes, maybe organizational, structural, what changes do you believe are necessary to help restore NASA's effectiveness in leading a mission to Mars?
Okay, so this is a very important question because some people observing, for instance, what a mess the Artemis program is, have said if we're going to get humans to Mars, it can't be NASA. We should just give the program to SpaceX. And I don't think that can work on either on a practical basis or a political basis. Giving it to SpaceX would be an enormous conflict of interest. It would make the program be perceived as a Elon Musk hobby horse. And given that he has now defined himself in extremely partisan terms, it would mean the program would be canceled as soon as the political fortunes of war shift in 2 or 4 years, and it's done. Okay, we have to make this an American program, and that means it has to be led by NASA. But it is true that NASA is a mess. And what I propose to do, actually, is make the Mars mission the vehicle by which we reform NASA. Okay, that is, the problem is this. NASA has 2 modes of operation. One is purpose-driven, the other is vendor-driven. Apollo was purpose-driven. Okay, its purpose was not scientific, but it definitely had a purpose. It was to astonish the world with what free people could do. The NASA Science Mission Directorate, for the most part, is purpose-driven. Okay, we didn't land rovers on Mars to give business to the airbag companies. Okay, that was not how it was done. So the purpose-driven program spends money, but it spends money to do things. The vendor-driven program does things in order to spend money. And so that's why you have this incoherent Artemis program in which you have 5 primary flight elements, including SLS, the Starship, the Gateway, the National Lander, and Orion, as well as many small things. And these things do not fit together because they weren't conceived of as a unified whole, as, for instance, the Saturn V LEM and command module were. That was conceived of as a whole to implement a plan. Here you have a bunch of different programs which arose at different times, and they are sustained by political pressure of the people who are being funded by them. Now, so this needs to be rationalized. Now, so if we do want to get to Mars in a near term, and I do not believe that the Trump administration will land humans on Mars in 4 years. Okay, I think that's just razzmatazz. I do think we can have humans on Mars in 8 years, absolutely. And I do think that with a lot of work and determination, we could land a Starship unmanned on Mars carrying a robotic science expedition to Mars in 4 years. And that would be a tremendous accomplishment by this administration, which would get the program well on its way and win a great deal of support for it from the scientific community. So it would not be a Musk-Trump thing. It'd be an America thing. It'd be a world science program thing. Okay. Okay. So how do we reform NASA? We make it purpose-driven. we set up a tiger team within NASA whose loyalty is to this mission. The loyalty of the people within this, they're not like the United Nations. The people of the United Nations are not there to represent the United Nations. They're there to represent various nations at the United Nations. Okay. What we need is a mission directorate, which is not there with this one representing Johnson Space Center and this one representing Jet Propulsion Lab and this one representing Boeing and this one SpaceX and this one is, the great state of Illinois. No, they represent the mission. And so while they will need to use various vendors, including NASA centers, aerospace companies, you name it, they want to use as few of them as possible. I used to run a company myself, Pioneer Astronautics, and we certainly had vendors, but I wasn't in business to make my vendors happy. I wanted to spend as little money as possible on my vendors, not as much as possible. My mission was not to try to get Christmas cards by throwing a lot of money around and making a bunch of vendors happy by ordering lots of stuff from them. My mission was to get my job done in the most economical and efficient way I could. And that has to be how this thing is run. And this becomes the central program in NASA, okay, and an example for a mission-driven approach. In the 1960s, human nature was no different from how it is today, okay? People always liked money, okay? There were plenty of people that showed up, at Apollo program planning meetings to say, you got a great program here, but you can't do your program until you do my program, okay? There was no shortage of them. And they were shown the door, okay? Because they said, we are trying to get to the moon. Go away. And this is not how Artemis has been done. This is how the Mars mission needs to be done. And if we use the correct Mars mission architecture, the same flight systems we use for Mars, we'll also be able to do the moon. And we'll have a very simple set of flight systems that will be able to do both the moon and Mars and asteroids too, for that matter.
You talk about it being purpose-driven during the Apollo era. And at that time, the goal was to astonish the world. But there was also that geopolitical tension with Russia, height of the Cold War. What would it take for us to be purpose-driven now? Are we on the cusp of another type of Cold War with China? There's that race to the moon and outer space. Do we need another type of Cold War to make that happen?
Well, actually, we're in something a bit hotter than the Cold War right now, even though some people may not realize it. The shooting has already begun. We are in a global conflict right now, which includes both ideological competition, but also a military action against a Russia-China axis, and which represents something very, very different from what we and the rest of the free world represent. And so, yes, we do have a requirement right now to once again astonish the world with what free people could do. In the early 60s, Khrushchev came here. He said, we will bury you, by which he didn't mean we're going to kill you. What he meant is that we will be around when you are gone, okay? That we are the future, you are the past. And the authoritarians are saying this right now as well. They say, well, the Americans, they had some stuff in their day, but they're past. We're the future. And we got to show that that's wrong. And this administration may not quite realize that, as we're seeing, but they're going to see it. Because these people are not interested in peace. They're interested in global domination.
Mm-hmm. You argue that America, not just private companies, should lead the mission to Mars. How can NASA balance interests while also collaborating with the companies and the enterprises that it needs to maintain its leadership in space exploration?
Oh, well, that's straightforward. NASA should absolutely have a friendly attitude towards the growth of private space capabilities. And actually, since Griffin, it definitely contributed to the growth of SpaceX, for example, and Blue. There's still some holdouts, SLS, so forth. But no, these private space initiatives have created technical capabilities that will allow the mission to be done much more efficiently. But here's the thing, okay? If you want to benefit from a free market, you got to be a free customer, okay? That is, NASA cannot be guided by Congress to say, well, we want you to spend your money here. Okay. Instead, the Tiger team has to make its decisions on what vendors that it buys services from on the basis of who's offering the most value for the money, not which senators it will please.
Speaking of the different programs, so you mentioned a couple, Gateway, SLS, Orion, for example. Where do you think the breakdown went wrong that none of these pieces fit together? You specifically mentioned in the article that Orion is too heavy to be carried on top of SLS. Why the breakdown in design that they don't fit together?
Because these things have been pursued as individual programs. In other words, look, Gateway was conceived of before Artemis. And in fact, Charlie Bolden, who proposed it, the previous NASA administrator, well, the one
Before
Obama, said it is the alternative to going to the moon. He said, we are not going to the moon, and we're doing this. Okay. And now Orion is something that was saved from Mike Griffin's moon program, but it was saved as a thing in itself when that program constellation fell apart. SLS, my God, I was on the team that did the preliminary design for what is now called SLS at Martin Marietta, a company that then became Lockheed Martin later, in 1988. Okay, and this was conceived of as a simplification of the space shuttle that would allow it to launch more payload and could be used to build the space station, because it would be available by, say, 1994, and we could use it to much more rapidly launch the space station. Okay, but this program has gone along at a snail's pace. It is the world's slowest launch vehicle development program. 2023, it flew the first time. So 35 years. I mean, a lot of the engineers on that program were not born when the program was begun, literally. And then even the SLS, it has the wrong upper stage for itself. Okay, it's crazy. And then you have the National Lander. Now, as we'll get into it, there is a good reason to have a smaller lander to go along with Starship. Starship is a great launch vehicle, and it could be used for translunar injection, but it's very suboptimal for a lunar ascent vehicle because it's so big and heavy. It's 100 tons. The Apollo lunar excursion module was 2 tons. Okay, so having a smaller ship that could go up and down from orbit to a Starship tanker positioned in lunar orbit would be a good idea. But the rationale for the National Lander wasn't that at all. It was that the national team was angry that they hadn't gotten the contract that SpaceX got, and they demanded to get a contract. And NASA finally gave in to them and gave them a contract. Here's your money. Now stop bothering us. Yeah. And they never put a requirement on them that their vehicle be compatible with Starship. So instead of running on methane oxygen, which Starship does, and it runs on hydrogen oxygen. So you can't use Starship as a refueling tanker for the National Lander. And then someone put the Gateway into it because they were doing the Gateway, and it has to have a role. It's like, you're doing a school play and it's Macbeth, and one of the students in the play is a great baseball player, and another one is a ballerina, and you have to rewrite Macbeth to include baseball player and a ballerina, okay, in order to give these kids a part. And it naturally does not really help the performance to do that. But that's what they're doing. Using the Starship, if you do the Starship architecture that SpaceX has proposed, okay, you got to refuel the Starship in Earth orbit to get it to the Gateway, and then you got to refuel a bunch of tankers in the Gateway to get them to the Gateway, to refuel the Starship to go down to the moon and up again. Okay, you do all that, it ends up taking 14 Starship launches to do one lunar mission. If, however, you did the same kind of thing but avoided the Gateway and just went to low lunar orbit, you could do it with 10. So if the Gateway existed right now and was sitting there waiting for us to use it, I wouldn't use it. Okay. it's an imposition. It's like someone saying, you want to fly from New York to Los Angeles, we got a great airport in Mexico City, you could stop by. um why? uh and even worse, they say, we want you to build an airport in Mexico City so you can fly from New York to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
um okay, so
I love
it's an incoherent program. So so anyway, so we could talk about what it should be, but actually, what I'd like to talk about is the Mars program itself. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I could come back to Artemis, because a lot of people who want to get to the moon are upset, with some reason, that the Mars program is going to wreck the moon program. And there you go. And actually, there is a danger of that. In fact, there's a danger that the Mars program, is currently conceived, is going to wreck the Webb Space Telescope. Okay. Because we're seeing the Doge propose large budget cuts to the Space Telescope Science Institute, which is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but
I have a question about that. Wanted to know, your thoughts on Hubble aging, no commitment to service it, web-facing operational limits. Should NASA continue to prioritize their lifespan, or say, let's cut?
absolutely.
Okay. It should.
Okay. 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 We'll just take 1 minute on this, and then let's get back to Mars. Okay.
Yes.
In 2005, when President Bush declared his whatever it was called, Vision for Space Exploration or something, Moon, Mars, and Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Um, NASA Administrator O'Keefe took advantage of the moment and how everybody was excited about that, and says, okay, we're canceling the Hubble repair mission. And I said, no. And people said, what? What? You're not happy? Why do you care about a space telescope when we're going to the moon and Mars? I said, look, if you don't have the guts to repair Hubble, you're not going to the moon and Mars. Okay. That's point one. Point two is the Hubble is a world-class. It's more than world-class. It's an epic class science instrument. It is a Gothic cathedral of our civilization. The Gothic cathedrals for Christian Europe, they were a symbol of what they thought was the greatest ideals of their civilization. Well, the greatest ideals of our civilization is the search for truth through science, and Hubble is the symbol of it. And to abandon that, and of course, we didn't go to the moon and Mars. If we had abandoned Hubble, we would have also lost that. Okay. And look, we've now, it took a long time to get Hubble up there. It took even longer to get Webb up there. We want to use these things. We want to find out the truth of the laws of physics in the universe. And I mean, look, one of the reasons why we want to become a spacefaring species is to expand our knowledge of the universe, because it's through knowledge you get technology. Okay, most of our knowledge of physics came through astronomy, and the best place to do astronomy is space. Okay, we go to Mars, we're going to learn a lot about biology, because I think we will discover microbial life underground on Mars, but we will possibly discover different kinds of biological information systems in those organisms, which could do incredible things for biotechnology if we had a broader understanding of what the true limits of biotechnology are, which we do not from the one sample of life and one biological information system that we're acquainted with right now on Earth. Okay, so no. Okay, and the Mars program should be science driven. Okay, now this is another very important point. Okay, Musk has done great things for Mars by creating reusable rockets, but his understanding of why we need to go to Mars is off base. Okay, the idea that we should send humans to Mars so that there's some survivors on Mars after Earth is destroyed is a repellent rationalization for the program. Okay, first of all, a human colony of Mars, even 1 million people, would not survive as an autarky. And second of all, it's saying to the rest of the human race, we care about ourselves, drop dead. This is white flight taken to the ultimate limit. This is, it's like, his model is, the Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, where the scientist predicts the galactic empire is going to collapse. So they send a bunch of scientists to the planet Terminus on the edge of the galaxy. So after the empire, the galactic civilization collapses, they can reemerge to reestablish civilization. Okay, but really what this is like, it's more like, Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Mask of the Red Death, where there's an epidemic going on outside, and so some rich people go inside of a castle and party while the rest of the world dies. Okay, they do not survive. Now, and they don't deserve to survive. Now, here's the thing, though. The reason why we're going to Mars, I mean, immediate reason is for the science. Second is for the challenge. But the third is for the future. It's not to have some survivors after Earth be destroyed, but to create new branches of human civilization that will add their creative powers to humanity as a whole and allow the human race to more effectively deal with all the challenges that it faces, including, of course, at the top of the list, asteroid impacts, but other things. If you have more centers of invention, you're going to invent more new technologies. You take, this COVID epidemic we had a few years ago, okay, because you had different places working on it. We had actually 3 different vaccines were invented. And, if there had been fewer people working on it, there might have only been 1 and maybe none. And so whatever the challenges are, whether they're asteroids or epidemics or the need for new sources of energy, carbon-free energy, cheap fusion power. I think the Martians are going to develop fusion power because Mars has got 5 times the deuterium as Earth, and they don't have fossil fuels. So, and that'll be something that will do us a lot of good. But whatever it is, having more creative engines working for the human race will benefit all of humanity. That is why humans should expand into space in general and Mars in particular. We're not doing this out of despair. We're doing this out of hope.
I love that answer. That summarizes why Mars and why Mars over the moon. I was curious, after reading your article, you specifically mentioned the idea of a cash prize. There being a team that's referring to your Tiger team, but essentially the government offering a prize to could it be companies, agencies, different organizations that could develop the technology to get there under a certain amount? And hey, if they develop the technology, they get the prize. How does that work?
Okay. Well, first of all, my view of the Mars Prize, it is a way to do it. That's an alternative to the Tiger Team approach. And the Tiger Team approach is my favorite approach because I believe that NASA can be saved and should be saved. I believe that NASA is one of the jewels in America's crown. I think it would be a crime to destroy NASA, an immense crime. But the Mars Prize, if we didn't have a Mars program, the Mars Prize is an alternative approach, which is better than nothing, which is the U.S. government offers a cash prize, and I forget the numbers that I mentioned, but $10 billion or something for the first company that sends a team of astronauts to Mars and back, and maybe a smaller but still substantial prize for the second company. Because one problem with prize competitions, you can say, I'm doing everything right, but somebody did it first, and I'm losing all my money. That's not fair. So I would also have a prize for the runner-up. But the advantage of that approach is that, first of all, as far as the taxpayer is concerned, the cost of the program is absolutely fixed, and you don't pay a cent unless someone actually succeeds. So, that offers a lot. But I prefer to use the Mars mission as the way to restore NASA to greatness, because I think we can do great things with NASA. And I think also, once again, I want this Mars program to be our program, America's program, not SpaceX's program, that we are spectators to. Okay, this has got to be us that's doing this. This has got to be us reaffirming our identity as a nation of pioneers. Okay, when we landed astronauts on the moon, it wasn't Rockwell sent people to the moon, okay, or Grumman, which did the Lemon. Okay, this was America, and I think it's very important that this be about who we are, not about who they are.
I think that's a great answer. Okay. Well, I see we've got some audience questions, and I want to make sure that we get through some of those. And so let's try to sprinkle some of those in. We have a question from Kevin Holden who asks, if Robert has talked to Elon about the Incredible Starboat plan. Can you tell us what that?
Well, yeah, I did. And at that time, it was called the Mini Starship. But since that does not really roll off the tongue, I prefer to call it Starboat. Then it just becomes a lot clearer. You have Starship and Starboat.
Right.
Okay. And to get right to it, um, the, there's a lot of good things about the SpaceX Mars mission plan. It is a something. Its point of departure was my own Mars Direct plan, which was direct launch to Mars, direct return from Mars using methane oxygen propellant made on Mars. Okay. Now his vehicle designs are completely different from the ones that I proposed in the Mars Direct plan, but this basic mission architecture is the same. Now, and he's using something with a much higher payload delivery capability to Mars than what I proposed, because my attention was on Mars exploration. Musk's vision is centered on Mars settlement. I also believe in Mars settlement, but I think exploration precedes settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the the defect in Musk's plan is that the Starship is really big, and to send it back from Mars to Earth on a direct trajectory would involve making about 600 tons of propellant on Mars. This compares to 100 tons in Mars Direct. Um, and so you would need 600 kilowatts, which if you did it with solar panels would be 13 football fields of solar panels deployed on the surface of Mars and kept dusted off and all of this. And this is like a mess. All right. Now, um, so now one idea is to have two ships, one which could be Starship going one way to Mars with Starship is fine. You land a big payload on Mars and you got Starship landed on Mars. You got an apartment building on Mars right there. Okay. But coming back with a Starship, that's a problem. So if you had a smaller ship to come back with, you can make less propellant. And if you made something about 1/5 the size of Starship, 1/5 the mass of Starship, it would probably be about 1/2 the size looking at it. But well, it would take 1/5 the propellant if it came all the way back from Mars, and it would take 1/10 the propellant if instead of going all the way back from Mars, given that you actually have a Starship, park a Starship in Mars orbit, okay, and just go up and down from the surface of Mars in a reusable starboat. So the starboat is a mini Starship. It'd be something that looks something like Starship, but much smaller, needs much more propellant. And if it's going up and down, okay, it takes 3.8 kilometers a second delta V to go up from Mars surface to Mars orbit, and only about 0.2 to come down, because the Mars atmosphere does the slowing you down. You just need a little bit of delta V to land after you're subsonic. So that's a 4 kilometer a second delta V to go up and down from Mars orbit. Well, guess what? To go up and down from low lunar orbit to the lunar surface is 1.9 kilometers a second each way, or 3.8 total, almost the same thing. So the same Starship starboat combination that does Mars could also do the moon. Okay. Now someone could come along and say, yeah, but for the moon, I wouldn't need the thermal protection that I use on Mars, and I could save weight by not having it. And that's true, but it wouldn't, other than costing you a little extra fuel, it doesn't hurt you. Okay. So Musk is trying to do it all with one size fits all. Okay. I believe it should be two sizes fits all. There's an argument that could be made that we could be a little more efficient if we had three sizes fits all, or even the Mars one having some wings, which would give it better surface to surface travel capability. Then you have four sizes fit all. But the biggest gain, in other words, you could go endlessly in terms of degrees of specialization for different tasks. But the argument against having multiple vehicles is they require additional development. Okay. So the biggest single gain you get going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is going from 1 to 2. Okay. And if you do from the 1 to 2, Starship plus Starboat gives you both the moon and Mars, and with a vastly more efficient architecture than either the current Artemis mission architecture, which is simply madness, or the Musk Mars architecture, which is not mad, but which is severely suboptimal. And also, the Starboat could be used to go surface to surface on Mars. In other words, it's smaller, so it doesn't take as much fuel to fuel it up, and you could go a couple of thousand kilometers away from the base, land, explore a place over there, and fly back to the base. So having a smaller vehicle, in addition to allowing you to do much more Mars missions for your trouble, allows the Mars base itself to become much more effective as a place that supports Mars exploration, because now instead of just traveling locally in ground rovers, you can travel thousands of kilometers in the Mars boat, the Starboat, and so there it is. And that's how I would do this. And then, as far as the moon is concerned, if you wanted to do this, you could give a totally new contract for Starboat, or if you make some compromises with politics, you simply tell the national team, we're changing your contract. You still got a contract, but we don't want you doing this crazy hydrogen oxygen lander that has nothing to do with anything. You turn this into Starboat. You go methane oxygen, this kind of ship, and there you are. And guess what? A Starboat could be used as a reusable upper stage on a New Glenn. Okay. And that would turn that into a reusable system. It could also be used, it depends on how big you build the Starboat, but it could also be a reusable upper stage on a Falcon 9. So you'd have a reusable medium lift system as well as the reusable heavy lift Starship system. And there are missions for which, that would be better. So this would we could do both the moon and Mars with the same hardware and do them both better than is currently being proposed. And this should be, in my view, the mission plan.
And avoid the issue that we've seen with the, to our point earlier, SLS, Orion, all those disjointed pieces that don't.
Yeah, SLS would have been a great thing if we had brought it on as planned in the mid-90s, and we, for the past quarter century or 30 years, we would have had heavy lift until Starship came along and replaced it. Okay. The problem with SLS is not that it's a bad design, it's that it's coming along 30 years later than it should have come along. Mm-hmm. So it's like designing a great World War II fighter, but introducing it today. Say, Spitfire, what is this?
Right.
So it's out of its time.
Speaking of taking way too long, out of its time, let's touch on Mars. We have a question about it, but I also had one as well. It seems like NASA has dropped the ball on Mars sample return, and there's really no current plan. In your opinion, do you think that we should still be trying to should Mars sample return still be a priority, or should it be completely scrapped? And do you see that there's maybe an alternative or a better approach, a better way to receive those samples returning those to Earth?
Yeah, I think Mars sample return, once again, is something that we were planning for in the 80s and could have been done in the 90s or the aughts or teens, but it has now been passed by time because, see, look, and this is while the claims that we could send a human expedition to Mars in 2028 are false. It is possible, if we focus on this program, that we could land either a Starship or a Starboat. Let's call it a Starship because we actually have it or almost have it. There's going to be another test launch tomorrow. I'm hoping they can actually make orbit this time, but if they don't, they'll make it the next time. This is going to happen. They will be orbital this year for sure. Okay, Musk claims he can land 100 tons with a Starship on Mars, cargo. Now, Musk frequently exaggerates, or at least he exaggerates when something can become available. Let's say 30 tons, okay? not 130. Let's give them 30. Well, right now the JPL with their Curiosity Perseverance lander, they can land 1 ton on Mars. We are about to have the capability to land 30 tons of cargo on Mars. Okay, so let's use this to land not one robotic rover or something, but a robotic expedition. Let's land 15 rovers and 15 helicopters. And by helicopters, I don't mean little tiny ones like Ingenuity, but the, move from the Sojourner kind of rover to the Spirit and Opportunity rover. Same thing with helicopters. Let's send some helicopters that can have 50 kilograms of science instruments on them, and be able to do some serious exploration. We'll have 15 of them, 15 rovers, and some drillers and some light detection experiments, and we'll have a well-instrumented lab in the lander itself. And we can send these rovers out. We can send the helicopters out. They can collect hundreds, thousands of samples from far away, bring them back to the Starship, bring them into the lab on the Starship, and subject them to all science and scientific investigations there. Okay, see, this is coming to grips with the idea that not only was Starship is going to give us heavy lift, it's going to give us heavy payload delivery to the surface capability. And so we have to rethink our robotic exploration paradigm from a single Atlas or Falcon delivering a single payload to Mars to a Starship or even a Starboat delivering a whole robotic expedition. And such an expedition could produce, I would say, about 100 times the science as the kinds of missions we've been doing up till now. And if you do that, we're going to get tremendous gains out of this Human Mars program immediately. We will increase our science return immediately. We will increase the participation of this program vastly. For every instrument that made it onto Curiosity or Perseverance, there were 10 that were proposed. But they couldn't come because there was only room for like 6 instruments, not 200 instruments. Okay. Right. Well, if we send 15 rovers and 15 helicopters, as well as a static lab and a few other things, I mean, we can have a couple of hundred instruments sent to Mars as part of this mission. We can do all kinds of stuff. So we've got teams of scientists and their grad students and undergraduate students from all over the United States and all over the world, from allied countries, all participating in this. And this is tremendous for science, and it's also going to be tremendous for public support for the program. If we want this program to survive the Trump administration, it's got to be bipartisan. And one of the best ways to make it bipartisan is to make it about science, because the university-based science community kind of leans left. If they become supportive of this program will have the support it needs to go the distance. And it will deserve the support it needs to go the distance.
Yeah, let's pull on that thread a little bit. Another question here: what supply chain issues need to be addressed to accelerate the humans on Mars goal in the shortest time possible?
Okay, so we need, first of all, you need heavy landing capability. And the Starship program, including getting to orbit, having tankers that can refuel it on orbit, and then being able to land significant payloads of at least 10 tons. I'm pretty sure they will exceed that significantly. I don't know if they'll get a 100-ton payload to Mars. That's a lot. But, 30, sure. That would give you the logistical capability. The Starboat, if you understand how to build starships, you can build Starboat. So we need to do that. We need to get working on that straight away. And we can exercise these capabilities to be doing lunar missions, actually, in this 2028 timeframe. That is definitely could be done, as well as robotic expeditions in 2028 and 2031. But then we also have to be developing the surface systems. Okay, and this is why this needs to be a public-private partnership, because you see, flight systems entrepreneurial companies can have business plans that justify flight systems, because any flight system can be used to launch satellites, for example. Um, but Mars surface systems, the business plan for that is not quite as easy to sell to investors. And so this is one reason why NASA has to be part of this. We're talking about Mars spacesuits, Mars surface power systems. This is a very important one, because I mentioned 13 football fields of solar panels. Forget it. You want a nuke. And a Mars surface nuclear power reactor um, is something you really need to have the government involved with, because it involves controlled materials. Space nuclear reactors involve highly enriched uranium, which could be used to make weapons. And so this is the kind of thing where you got to get the government involved. But once again, we have to use the development of the space nuclear reactor to reform the Department of Energy, because let me tell you, NASA has its problems, but the Department of Energy makes NASA look like Apple. It's a total mess. NASA has its good days and bad days. I don't know of a single Department of Energy program that has ever succeeded. Um, and really, and the of any consequence. Um, Nor has it succeeded in its overall mission of making America energy independent. Um, but it's supposed to do breeder reactors. No, it went nowhere with its fusion program. So forth. You can go on, but it needs to be mission driven, as the earlier AEC was. Um, the uh, but yes, we need surface nuclear reactors. We need the system for making methane oxygen on Mars developed at scale. I mean, Pioneer Astronautics, my former company, we did this. We built the systems that could do this, 1 kilogram a day, and a partial system that could do 10 kilograms a day, which is the most, I believe, of anyone in the space community having built this. But even to do Mars Direct, you need 100 kilograms a day. And to do, if you really did the Musk way, you would need like a ton a day. So these things need to be built at a larger scale. It needs to be developed. It's not fundamental science. It's not Los Alamos 1943, in which you are venturing into unknown realms of physics. It's engineering, but engineering takes work and it has to be done right. And so there's a bunch of systems that are going to be needed. Now that's for Mars expeditions. For Mars settlement, you need even more. Okay, because, for instance, you can send an expedition to Mars with all its food. Mars settlement's going to need to grow their food. Okay, and a Mars city is going to have to grow lots of food, which means we got to even go beyond greenhouse type agriculture to things that are more advanced than conventional agriculture altogether, involving biotech. But those are issues for the future. If we're talking about having humans land on Mars in 2033, which is possible, we're going to need to work on the full array of both, not just transportation systems, but surface systems.
We've thrown out some dates here, and that's a good segue to a question that has come through from Kevin. It says, and it's a two-part. So, would it be even remotely possible to launch your proposed brigade of robots to Mars in 2026 rather than 2028? So, I think he's referring to the 15 rovers, the 15 helicopters, and then the part two of that question is human to Mars in 2028 even possible, assuming Elon's 2026 mission was successful?
Once again, I wish that it was, but I just speaking as a realist, I don't see it, and I'll tell you why not. Okay, because it's now 2025. Okay, and you're talking about launching to Mars in 2026, and for Starship to go to Mars, you not only have to get Starships on orbit, you got to get Starship tankers on orbit and perfect orbital refueling. And to have a meaningful payload that you land on Mars, you would also have to develop that payload inside of basically a year. And I just don't see that. Um, and, but 2028, absolutely. I think that could be done. that would be for a forcing function. You're talking about developing all this stuff within 3 years. Okay, but I think we could do it. I absolutely think we could do it, and and that should be the goal, to have a terrific robotic expedition to Mars in 2028. Now you say, if we did that, could we land people in 2031? The launch windows are every 26 months, not exactly 2 years, and you know you click over from even years to odd years as it happens at the turn of this decade. So the next launch window after 2028 would be 2031, which kind of is a mirror of 2001. Every 15 years, and therefore every 30 years, the timing of Mars missions duplicates. But it's conceivable we could land people in 2031. That I give that one chance in four. I think we definitely could land people on Mars in 2033.
More realistic. Okay. Well, let's see. We've got another question here, and this was actually submitted by one of my Thunderbird cohorts. The recent nomination of Jared Isaacman to lead NASA has been well received and applauded by the commercial space sector for potentially bringing new perspective to NASA. Can you share your thoughts on Isaacman potentially leading NASA and how it might impact the human to Mars mission?
Well, I think that he is a good choice, and we'll have to see what he does. But he certainly has a record in the private sector. He has a documented love of space. He's not just some guy who was appointed to this because he was a political camp follower or something. And he has a direct connection to Elon Musk, which gives him a direct connection to the White House. So he's going to have political heft, which he's going to need to push obstacles out of his way. So he is a person with the right disposition and beliefs and intellect and background in running a company, and he's got the right connections. Now let's see what he does. But yeah, I think it was a pretty good choice.
He seems like a good choice. Let's see. Another question here from Dave, who asks, how can we satisfy planetary protection folks' concerns?
You can't. Okay, planetary protection is incompatible with human missions to Mars. You can't. There's no way you can do it. Because, first of all, you cannot assure anyone that you're not going to crash, in which case, if you're carrying people, you're going to be scattering the microbes all over the Martian landscape, period, full stop. Okay? And even if you don't crash, as soon as you do EVA, you're going to be releasing microbes into the Martian environment. Okay, so, but the whole planetary protection thing is nonsensical. Okay, look, there's natural transport of material between Earth and Mars. We get 500 kilograms of Mars rocks landing on Earth every year, and the Allen Hills meteorite, which was the one that was entered into public controversy in 1996 because some scientists at Johnson Space Center thought that they saw evidence of past microbial action in this Martian meteorite. And this is very controversial. It remains controversial to this day. Okay, however, the discussion itself was very productive because this rock was then examined with incredible scrutiny. And as a result, scientists named Kirschvink, who I believe was at either UCLA or Caltech, he and his team looked at the Allen Hills meteorite, and what they discovered as part of their investigation was that significant portions of that rock was never erased above 40 centigrade during its entire career of ejection from Mars, cruise through interplanetary space, and re-entry and landing on Earth. What that means is if there had been microbes in that rock, they could have survived the trip. Okay, that is, ejection and flight through space of rocks is not a sterilizing event. And we've had literally billions of tons of Martian material delivered to Earth since, um, 3.5 billion years ago when life appeared on Earth, and presumably could have on Mars, roughly that time. Um, and material from Earth has been sent to Mars too. So trying to govern the traffic of microbes between planets, it would be like passing a law saying that all tourists coming in from Canada, we have to inspect their cars for Canada geese to make sure nobody's bringing in any Canada geese into the United States. When meantime, the flocks of them, thousands of them, are flying across the sky, across the border all the time. Um, and so, the microbes have their own ships. Now, look, the one interesting concern brought by the planetary protectionists is we want to protect Mars science by, if you detect life on Mars, how do you know that you didn't bring it? Okay. Well, you know, you go to Paris and you find human civilization there. How do you know it was there before you? Um, well, you can see all these buildings all over the place that clearly were built, before you got off your airplane, and in some cases considerably before you got off the airplane. And so life leads evidence of its past existence. Okay, human civilization does, and life forms do. There were dinosaurs on Earth once. How do we know? We find fossils. Um, if you go to Mars, if there is native life on Mars, if you find bacteria on Mars, well, first of all, if you find anything on Mars that's different from Earth life, you didn't bring it, okay? But if you find the stuff that's the same as Earth life, how do you determine whether you brought it or not? If it's native, there'll be biomarkers, there'll be fossils, there'll be waste products, there'll be all this stuff. If you go to Mars and find E. coli, but no evidence of past existence, then you brought it.
That easy.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. It is, do you think that Elon and Trump will allow this Mars mission to be partisan?
Well, that is a difficult question. It would be a very big mistake if they choose to make this a partisan wedge. That will doom the program in the long run. Okay, right now they're very high on their victory and they are trampling everyone who opposes them. But this is not going to last. Political fortunes of war are always changing. And if they make this about themselves, they will defeat the program. Uh, they can have eternal glory for starting the program if the program succeeds. If the program succeeds, there'll be glory enough for everybody. If the program fails, there'll be no glory for anybody.
There we go. Well, hopefully, we can come together. There be a unifying support from Trump. We have support from Congress with Jared and Elon at the helm, and we'll see humans get to Mars in the next decade. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen by 2026, and maybe not 2028, but 2031 or 33.
Yeah, but if we can see a Starship land on Mars in the 2028 launch window carrying a robotic expedition, this will be a new era in space exploration, and it will be the action that sends this program on its way. This will be what makes this program popular enough to survive all the future forms of adversity that it encounters. I mean, a program like this, it's going to have bad days. It's going to have launch failures. There's going to be things that happen that are going to create opposition. So it needs to have broad support if it's going to go the distance. Apollo did. We lost 3 astronauts in the Apollo 1 fire, but people were with that program. That program was not, some, thing that had been perceived, put through by a Bond villain against the will of the American people. This was a program that had been announced by a hero president and who captured the imagination of the nation and of the world. And that's what this program needs to be.
100% agree with you. Yeah. Absolutely. No mission will be successful without some hurdles and some struggles, but I think we're going to have a change in the tide here soon. More people support it.
So anyway, that's why the theme of our conference, though, is Mars, the time has come, because the time has come. So I hope people listening to this podcast will come to Los Angeles. The call for papers is out right now. If you have any idea of anything relating to Mars exploration, from the nearest term robotic mission to human missions, to human settlement, to the politics, the philosophy, the history of exploration, anything relating to the human exploration and settlement of Mars, submit your abstract. And if you don't want to talk, don't submit an abstract, but come and hear what other people have to say.
I love it. That's the best plug for the convention right there. Well, Dr. Zubrin, thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. I appreciate you coming on and answering all of our questions.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thanks for all the great questions.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give a special thanks to our Executive Director, James Burke, our PR Director, Michael Stoltz. Leah, thank you so much. Leah is operating behind the scenes and she's always a great help. I want to close out the show the way that we always do. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for submitting your great questions. It's been an awesome conversation. And as you know, the best is yet to come.